Hi guys, Mr. Wilson here and welcome to day 2 of your revision. Now the first topic we're going to look at is proportion, and on the higher tier paper they ask us about what's called direct proportion, and we'll get onto this one in a minute, called inverse proportion. So the first thing you need to understand is how to form the equations. So if it tells us that y is directly proportional to x, what we introduce is this constant, which we use the letter k, because we're already using c and y equals mx plus c and other things. So we say y is equal to kx. This means y is directly proportional to x. Now this one is a little bit more complicated. So p is directly proportional to q squared. So p is directly proportional when we put k q squared. This means p is directly proportional to q squared. And the last one, k is directly proportional, so it's another k, which I shouldn't have chose these letters. In fact, I'm going to put an n there. So n is directly proportional to the cube of m, which means m cubed. So you'll see in a minute I'll do a full question, but the first thing you have to do is write down a formula that shows this sort of language here. So if it's directly proportional, k is on the same line as k multiplied. Now if it's inverse, what this means is something slightly different. Now when you think of inverse proportion and you think of like say tan, and to find the inverse of tan you would do tan to the minus 1, and anything to a minus 1 is normally 1 over something. So for example, that is the same as that. So when it's the inverse, we normally associate it with this 1 over. And that's exactly what happens here. So y is inversely proportional to x. We put k over x. So when it was directly proportional, it was kx on the same line. When it was inversely proportional, it's k over. And they're the two things you've got to remember, basically. So p, just change that. P is inversely proportional to the square root of q. So P is inversely proportional, so it's k over the square root of q. And the last one, n, is inversely proportional, so it's k over the cube of m, so it's m cubed. Now, we're going to take this a little bit further. So if I turn over, I've written some questions for you. So let's look at this one. We're told that a is directly proportional to the square root of 8. So a is direct, so it's k root x. And now they're giving us a bit more information. So when x is 4 and a is 8. So I put an 8 there. We don't know what k is, but we know x is 4. Now you should be able to look at that and say, well, that's 2. So 8 is the same as k times 2, which is 2k. And then we can work out what 1k is, and that is also 4. So part A normally says form an equation to represent this information. So instead of, this isn't the full equation, because what we're actually asking you to find is this constant value. So the equation is 4 root x. We can go from here to this bit because we know now the constant is 4. So part B, it might ask you something like this. So find out what x is when a is 64. So we know a is 64, and it's 4 times square root of x. So we can get the square root of x on its own by dividing by 4, halving and halving again if you're a little bit unsure. So the square root of something, square root of x is 16. So a lot of people put x as 4 here, but that doesn't work. It means we're going to have to square both sides to remove the square root. Now 16 squared, I believe, is 256. Let me just check that very quickly. Yeah, I didn't trust my memory there. So x is actually 256, but a lot of people would put 4 for that one. Let's have a look at this one. So P is inversely proportional. So P is inversely proportional, so it's K over the cube of W, so it's W cubed. And like before, we've got the numbers. These questions never ever change. So P is 5 and W is 2. So I can tidy this up. So K is over 8 because 2 cubed is 8. And to get K on its own, I'm going to multiply by 8, and therefore that is 40. So this is my initial setup, but this is not the formula representing this information. I've got to use my value of K. So P equals 40 over W cubed. So like I said previously, this is often part A. Write an equation to show this proportionality, and then they'll give you something like this. So work out the value of W when P is 10. So we know 10 is 40 over W cubed. Now, depending on how good your algebra knowledge is here, when something's on the bottom, you can swap. If you don't know that, you can times by W cubed to get up here, and then divide by 10 to put that down there, but you can just switch them if you're pretty decent. So something cubed is equal to 4. Now, for this one, this is not going to be a whole number answer, and you'd probably be given a calculator and asked to round it to 2 decimal places or something. But to get rid of a cubed, you have the cube root. So W is equal to the cube root of 4, and that's how I'm going to leave my answer.